Stereotypes and media literacy. While media is a platform for positive changes, it is also a hotbed for manipulation as well. It is a platform through which stereotypes are constructed and supported with quite a harmful influence on our thoughts and minds. Critical media literacy focuses on unpacking hidden power messages in the media and learning to resist the messages. Let us try to understand what is a stereotype and how to recognize gender, ethnicity, or disability-based stereotypes, how to deconstruct these stereotypes and understand why stereotypes are problematic. What is a stereotype? A stereotype is a fixed general image or set of characteristics, an overgeneralized belief about a particular group in society. Stereotypes involve associating a group with a general characteristic, for example, being good or bad at something, being poor or violent, smart or less intelligent. A stereotype assumes that anyone in a given group is very likely to have certain characteristics. People do not usually state a stereotype explicitly. They may say that women are bad drivers. So stereotypes are fixed and rigid descriptions of groups of people, allowing the distinction between us and them. Stereotypes can be rooted in all of us, often without our knowledge, and could be quite harmful. When we accept and respond to stereotypes, we risk making assumptions about people that can harm individuals or members of that group. Furthermore, stereotypes are harmful to people outside of the affected groups. Now, stereotypes can be positive or negative, but even the positive ones could have negative effects. It is good to be a blues singer or a musician, which are common stereotypes about African Americans. But if we think that this is the only area in which they can achieve something, then they will probably behave in ways that close off opportunities for African Americans in professions other than entertainment. Similarly, if African Americans internalize the message that these are the only areas for them to get ahead in music, then they can be directed away from other professional areas in which they might be successful as well. Stereotypes and media. Why is it important to consider this relationship? Some stereotypes have a grain of truth, but are over-exaggerated. Others are merely a tool for transferring feelings of animosity and danger onto objects that are not the real cause of these feelings. Stereotypes are deeply rooted in cultural attitudes, and it is difficult to break them, even if they strongly misrepresent reality. Stereotypes themselves are often viewed as false overgeneralizations made by socially dominant groups about socially oppressed groups, and as such have been prevalent in the media to varying degrees for many years. It is often assumed that the repeated presentations of social groups in particular ways in the media are partly responsible for the effects of how audience members think about people in those groups. Why are stereotypes in the media important to consider? On the one hand, stereotypes are important because of what they do, while on the other hand, they are important because of what they mean. It is obvious that stereotypes in the media can influence our interpretations of media content in a way that supports dominant myths about race, gender, disability, and so on, maintaining unjust, harmful, and dominating understanding. Such automatic priming can occur whether or not the individual involved endorses the stereotype, and although people can subsequently argue against the automatically primed constructs, the damage has already been done in a sense. Social dominance theory proposes that human social systems tend to organize themselves as group-based hierarchies of status and power, and dominant groups have greater access to material and symbolic resources compared to the subordinate ones. Social hierarchies are created and maintained by legitimizing myths that include stereotypes, attitudes, and values that provide justification for current social inequalities. Based on social dominance theory, we expect that gender and ethnic stereotypes will map onto the social hierarchies of gender and ethnicity. There are research data indicating racism and sexism in films, video games, and advertisements. Here are some examples of stereotypes manifested in media. News media play a key role in reaffirming unequal power relations in society by systematically over-accessing people in powerful and privileged institutional positions, officials, experts, politicians, often to the detriment of alternative viewpoints. Commercial pressures, the drive to attract maximum audiences and thereby advertising revenue, means that stories tend to be centered on the middle ground of the dominant, often white, opinion and interests, and the lack of diversity in many newsrooms means they tend to reflect the experiences and assumptions of a largely white middle-class workforce. Some research on inequalities in Hollywood film and television production, for example, demonstrates the lack of diversity in entertainment media content. Hollywood is a predominantly white sphere where racial and ethnic minorities are highly underrepresented in various roles, including acting, writing, and directing. Regardless of the medium, media generally present gender stereotypical images of males and females. For example, males are more commonly presented as the main subject, engaged in action behaviors, portrayed as financial providers, and shown in occupations related to science, technology, engineering, and/or blue-collar fields. Females are often portrayed as wives, mothers, and/or sex objects, when in occupations, females are often presented in fields perceived as nurturing, such as teachers, nurses, social workers, sex workers, or secretaries. How to deconstruct these stereotypes and to understand why stereotypes are problematic. How to challenge and change such stereotypical representations. Critical thinking is a process that involves asking appropriate questions, gathering and creatively sorting through relevant information, relating new information to existing knowledge, re-examining beliefs and assumptions, reasoning logically, and drawing reliable and trustworthy conclusions. The cognitive skills of analysis, interpretation, inference, explanation and evaluation, and of monitoring and correcting self-reasoning are at the heart of critical thinking. Critical media literacy focuses on unpacking hidden power messages in media and learning to resist these messages. Critical thinking serves as the basis of disclosing imposed generalizations, circulating as stereotypes in society, about who is us and them, who is normal and not normal. Critical media literacy requires recognition of how media texts normalize specific identities and affirm their social status through the assignment of cultural values to various social groups through stereotyping, among other methods. This construction particularly stigmatizes vulnerable groups of society, also distancing them from opportunities to participate equally in the life of society. In order to resist the construction of stereotypes, it is necessary to deconstruct them, to see what is wrong with them. We have to try to focus on how to analyze cultural texts in terms of social injustice. Critical media literacy calls for social activism, transforming us from passive consumers of media to active participatory democratic citizens. Some have argued that new digital media might provide an effective challenge by enabling spaces for alternative, grassroots storytelling and a democratization of content from a more diverse range of producers. Some researchers argue that media can either promote or call into question racial and ethnic stereotypes, and there is a potential for media to use their influence in a positive way to mitigate the effects of social stereotypes. An appropriate attention to the acquisition of intercultural competencies, linguistic, cultural, and communicative, may serve as an effective condition for the devisualization and deconstructing of stereotypical behavior, thus ensuring a proper and full-scale communication and cooperation among representatives of different cultures. Finally, we can try a simple exercise for further considerations. We can indicate the scope of the stereotype, that is, how much this stereotype fits to the group. Many, on average, or a few. This exercise is helpful because speakers are often not careful about whether they mean all, most, or some when generalizing about groups, and this is especially true with stereotypes. For example, consider the stereotype about scientists, that they are smart, isolated in their ivory tower, focused on their work, crazy or dangerous. Let us rethink in terms. All scientists are, most scientists are, some of the scientists are. Try to think, what are the differences between these three statements on the board? So, one way to confront stereotyping is by asking someone else to clarify what they mean, what their scope indicator is, and to rethink the meaning of the statement. Also, we can try to reformulate the statement, supporting with facts and constructive arguments. It is very important to avoid generalizations of traits and behaviors such as women prefer or men are satisfied with, etc. So, we must start with ourselves and begin to work together to change deeply rooted stereotypes.